In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is...
My mother-in-law has never accepted me for being a foreigner. But when she announced in front of everyone, my daughter and her children are my true family and deserve my family blessing, giving both houses only to my sister-in-law, my husband was devastated. My father-in-law's reaction would change everything. My mother-in-law has never liked me. I think one of the main reasons is that I come from a different country and my background has nothing to do with my husband's. Our cultures, traditions, and even our education are very different, and I think that's something she has never been able to accept. My husband and I met while working at the same company. From the first moment, there was an undeniable chemistry between us. Although I felt the same connection he did, I hesitated to take the next step. Part of me feared what his family would think, especially because I already sensed they might not approve of me. I tried to resist formalizing our relationship, not for lack of feelings, but for fear of the obstacles that might arise. However, my husband was always clear that we were meant to be together. He repeatedly assured me that his family's opinions wouldn't change how he felt about me. He promised that, no matter what happened, he would always be by my side supporting me. Over the years, my husband has kept his word. He has always been by my side as he promised. Winning over his family wasn't easy, and it took them time to truly accept me. At first, there was some reluctance, but as they got to know me, they began to see me for who I really am, not just as a stranger. Over time, they gave us their blessing, and things improved with most of them. Unfortunately, the only person who has never given in is my mother-in-law. She has never abandoned the idea that my husband somehow betrayed her by choosing me. In her mind, he should have married someone she approved of, someone she considered more suitable. She has even told him directly that he could have done much better if he had listened to her. No matter how hard I've tried to change her opinion, it has never worked. I've made an effort to be kind, respectful, and patient, hoping that over time she would warm up to me. But no matter what I do, it seems she decided what to think about me a long time ago. Since I come from a humble family, she assumes the worst. In her eyes, I only married her son for financial security. She doesn't care that I've worked hard all my life, or that I earn my own money. She refuses to believe that my intentions were sincere. What she doesn't understand is that, despite our financial difficulties, my parents did everything possible to secure my future. They may not have been rich, but they gave me everything they could, and I will be eternally grateful to them for that. Since I moved to this country, I've struggled to build my own life. One of my greatest prides has been helping my siblings move here so they can also have better opportunities. My parents, however, have preferred to stay in our country of origin, a decision I fully respect. For everything they've done for me, I make sure to send them money every month from my own income, not out of obligation, but because I want to take care of them as they took care of me. My husband and I work hard and earn practically the same. We share financial responsibilities equally, contributing equally to household expenses and our mortgage. We also have a joint account specifically for our children's needs, ensuring that we both actively participate in their upbringing. Despite contributing as much as my husband, my mother-in-law has never shown me even an ounce of respect. None of my contributions seem to matter to her in the slightest. In the early years, she didn't even bother to hide her feelings toward me. She was openly hostile, making rude and hurtful comments at every opportunity. These weren't subtle hints or passive-aggressive comments. She made it perfectly clear that she didn't approve of me. Her words hurt, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore them, they always made me feel insignificant. My husband, to his credit, never let her get away with it. Every time she tried to disrespect me, he defended me without hesitation. He always confronted her about her behavior, which frequently led to heated arguments between them. He has never wavered in his support for me. Over time, my mother-in-law seemed to realize that her comments only generated more conflict with her own son, so she stopped being so direct. She learned to bite her tongue, at least superficially, but although she no longer expresses her disapproval as openly as before, her attitude toward me has never changed. The coldness in her gaze, the way she avoids interacting with me unless absolutely necessary, and that general disdain she conveys, it's all still there, just below the surface. She has learned to disguise it well, even on what should have been one of the happiest days of our lives, our wedding. My mother-in-law made it painfully clear how much she despised me as a daughter-in-law. She refused to attend the ceremony, preferring to make a public spectacle of her disapproval. While we celebrated our love and commitment, she was on social media writing cruel things about me. She called me a quote, and manipulative woman who had stolen her son and forced him into marriage. It was as if she wanted everyone to believe that I had somehow tricked him into being with me, instead of accepting the simple truth. He had chosen me because he loved me. Her words hurt deeply. Not just me, but also my husband, our family, and friends. Everyone was outraged by what she had done, and after much discussion, they finally convinced her to delete the post. But the damage was already done. Those words, that public humiliation, still haunt me. It was then that I finally understood that I could never truly respect her. No matter how much time has passed, I still harbor resentment for how she has treated me. The only reason she remains part of our lives is for our children. As much as I'd like to exclude her completely, I can't justify cutting off my children's relationship with their grandmother. It wouldn't be fair to them. They deserve to have a relationship with her, regardless of how I feel. So, for them, we maintain contact. But it's purely for them. There is no real relationship between us beyond that. I remain defensive, knowing she will never truly accept me, and I've learned not to expect anything different. Now, getting to the most recent situation. Recently, my in-laws invited us all to lunch. My sister-in-law and her husband were also present with their children. At first, it seemed like a normal family gathering, with everyone chatting and catching up. But in the middle of the meal, my mother-in-law suddenly announced that she had something special to share. We all paid attention to her. As she rose from her chair, visibly excited to make her big announcement, she told us that she and my father-in-law had finally decided to fulfill a lifelong dream. They were going to sell most of their belongings and use that money, along with their retirement savings, to travel full-time in their caravan. It had always been their dream to hit the road and explore the world, and now that they were at a stage in life where they could finally do it, they had decided to embark on the adventure. We were all genuinely happy for them. It sounded like a wonderful experience, and we were glad they finally had the opportunity to live it. But then, my mother-in-law continued by announcing what would happen to the family home and the vacation home while they were away. She declared in front of everyone that both properties would go to my sister-in-law and her children. The room fell silent. My husband froze, completely surprised. My father-in-law and my sister-in-law looked at her, as confused as we were. But my mother-in-law, unfazed by everyone's reactions, continued talking as if this had been the most obvious choice in the world. She explained that since they would be traveling full-time, they no longer needed an entire house for themselves. Instead of selling it or dividing it equitably, she had decided that only my sister-in-law and her husband should move in and keep the house for themselves and their children. My sister-in-law's face lit up with excitement. She and her husband immediately began to profusely thank my mother-in-law for her generosity, acting as if they had just won the lottery. Meanwhile, my husband and I were sitting there in complete shock. My mother-in-law didn't even look at us, acting as if my husband and our children didn't even exist. Then, to make matters worse, she told my sister-in-law with a warm smile that she wanted her and her children to, quote, always have everything, because they were her true family and deserved her true family blessing. I was shocked at how dismissive she sounded. It wasn't just about the house. It was the implicit message. She was making it clear in front of everyone that, in her eyes, my husband and our children were not part of that family blessing. It was as if my husband wasn't really part of her family. I looked at my husband and immediately noticed that he was containing his emotions. He wasn't saying anything, but his silence spoke volumes. I know him well enough to recognize that, deep down, this hurt him deeply, and honestly, I couldn't blame him. To put this in context, my husband has done so much for his parents over the years. When they wanted to buy their vacation home, he helped them financially. He gave them thousands of euros without ever expecting them to pay him back. Additionally, he has helped his father in countless ways, buying him a new car, covering major repair expenses for the family home, and lending a hand whenever they needed any kind of financial support. His parents have never hesitated to ask him for money over the years, and he has always given it to them without thinking twice. But despite all that, when it came to something as important as deciding the future of the family properties, my mother-in-law didn't even consider him. She didn't acknowledge his contributions, his generosity, or even the fact that he had directly participated in helping them pay for these properties. Instead, she gave everything to my sister-in-law as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My sister-in-law has always been my mother-in-law's favorite. She's the daughter who can do no wrong in her eyes, but the reality is that she and my husband couldn't be more different. While my husband has worked hard and has always been willing to help others, my sister-in-law has spent much of her life depending on her parents. She dropped out of college and has never had a job, not even for a day. She went straight from living under her parents' roof to moving in with her husband, without ever having to support herself. Even when she and her husband bought their house, they had to borrow money from several family members just to be able to pay for it. Unlike my husband, she has never helped her parents financially or in any other significant way. And yet, there she was, receiving both the family home and the vacation home, as if it were her birthright. As if things couldn't get worse. My mother-in-law also casually commented to my sister-in-law that she could probably sell the vacation home in the future if it proved too expensive to maintain and use the money for her children. She said it so naturally, as if she wasn't stripping my husband of something he had contributed to financially, as if she wasn't completely ignoring that he also had children who were as much a part of the family as hers. At that moment, it became painfully clear that, in my mother-in-law's eyes, only one of her children mattered, and it wasn't my husband. It was then that my husband finally decided to speak up. He addressed his mother and, in a calm but firm voice, asked if she really believed that was fair. He reminded her that he had helped them financially over the years, especially with the vacation home, and that he had always supported them when they needed it. He wasn't demanding anything, he just wanted to understand why she had made the decision to give everything to his sister without even consulting him. My mother-in-law barely blinked. She simply shrugged and said that my sister-in-law deserved the inheritance more. She continued explaining that my husband and I were doing fine because he had ended up marrying a modern woman instead of a traditional one, just as she had always wanted him to do. Therefore, in her opinion, she preferred her daughter, who was a stay-at-home mom, to deserve the house more than us, because she and her husband were struggling more and could use the additional financial help for their children. My husband's jaw tensed, and I noticed he was containing his frustration. At that moment, my father-in-law, who had remained mostly quiet until then, finally intervened. He seemed confused and asked my mother-in-law when they had decided all that, because as far as he knew, they had never really discussed giving everything to my sister-in-law. It was evident from his tone that this was not a joint decision. It was something my mother-in-law had unilaterally decided and announced in front of everyone. My sister-in-law, however, was not going to give in. Instead of acknowledging my husband's legitimate concerns, she backed my mother-in-law's decision, saying that she and her family deserved the houses more than we did because they had more children and greater financial burdens. She acted as if my husband and I had never had to struggle, as if we hadn't worked hard for everything we had. I could see the pain on my husband's face. He has always known that his mother favors his sister, but this was blatantly obvious. His contributions, his sacrifices, even the simple fact of being her son didn't seem to matter. Seeing him so dejected made my blood boil. I wasn't expecting a handout from my in-laws, but I also wasn't expecting them to completely ignore my husband that way. He wasn't asking for everything. He just wanted to be treated as an equal member of the family, but my mother-in-law had made it clear. In her eyes, only one of her children deserved anything, and it wasn't him. My husband took a deep breath, his face unreadable. And then, in the calmest voice he could muster, he politely thanked my in-laws for lunch without adding anything else. There was no rage in his tone, no outbursts, just quiet restraint. Then, without saying another word, he turned to me and gave me a small nod, silently letting me know it was time to leave. I understood immediately, and, without hesitation, I stood up too, gathering our things and indicating to the children to follow us. The little ones didn't exactly understand what had just happened, but they could feel the tension in the air. My mother-in-law barely paid attention to us as we left, still enjoying my sister-in-law's gratitude. My sister-in-law, for her part, was too busy celebrating to care that her brother, the same person who had always been there for their parents, was leaving that house deeply hurt by what had just happened. The trip home was silent. My husband kept his eyes fixed on the road, gripping the steering wheel more tightly than usual. He didn't say much, but I could see how affected he was. Throughout the trip, I didn't pressure him to talk. Instead, I sat beside him, letting him process everything at his own pace. Sometimes silence says more than words, and at that moment I knew he needed space more than anything else. Since then, my husband had not said a word for hours. I wanted to comfort him, tell him he had every right to feel hurt, but I also knew this was something he had to deal with himself. To make matters worse, he was also receiving voice messages and texts from his sister. Again and again, she called him selfish and greedy for questioning their mother's decision. She accused him of causing unnecessary problems and creating drama over something that, in her opinion, wasn't even up for discussion. She acted as if he were the villain for daring to express his feelings, as if his years of support and sacrifices for his parents meant absolutely nothing. So Reddit, is my husband an asshole for feeling upset about his mother's decision? Update 1. First of all, I want to thank everyone who took the time to read my post, offer advice, and send words of support. Honestly, I didn't expect such an overwhelming response from this community, but reading all your comments has made me feel less alone in this situation. It means a lot to know that so many of you understand our position, and I really appreciate all the encouragement. I also wanted to clarify a few things, as I noticed several common questions and assumptions in the comments. Why didn't my father-in-law stop my mother-in-law's announcement? My father-in-law seemed as surprised as we were. From his reaction during lunch, it was evident that he had no idea my mother-in-law had already decided to give everything to my sister-in-law. He even asked her when they had made that decision, which practically confirmed that my mother-in-law had acted on her own. The truth is that my father-in-law is a very passive person. He doesn't like conflicts, and over the years, I've noticed that he generally just goes along with what my mother-in-law wants. I don't know if he'll talk about this later, but I don't have high hopes. Did my husband ever ask for the houses or expect an inheritance? No, my husband has never asked for anything, and what hurt him wasn't not getting the houses. It was the complete lack of consideration for his contributions and the way he was treated as if he wasn't even part of the family. He has given his parents so much help over the years, both financially and emotionally, and for his mother to act as if none of that mattered, that was the real betrayal. It's not about the money or property. It's about the implicit message in her decision to give everything to his sister and only to her children. Why did my mother-in-law do this? Honestly, I think it comes down to favoritism. My mother-in-law has always favored my sister-in-law to the point where she doesn't even try to hide it. In her eyes, my sister-in-law can do no wrong, and my husband will always be second best. This was just another way to reinforce that belief. It didn't matter how much my husband helped his family. My mother-in-law had already decided who deserved everything. Additionally, my mother-in-law has always despised me, so I can't help but feel that she also takes out some of that rejection on my husband. That's why she doesn't want our children to have any part in the inheritance. What's going to happen now? Right now, my husband is still processing everything. He hasn't talked much about it, and I'm giving him space to deal with it in his own way. He hasn't responded to his sister's messages, and I don't think he plans to. I think he's realizing that, no matter how much he gives, his mother will never truly appreciate him, as she does his sister. As painful as it is, I think it's also giving him some clarity about his true position in the family. Again, thanks to everyone for your support and for validating what we're feeling. I'll update if anything important happens. Update 2. A few weeks have passed since the incident, and my husband hasn't contacted his mother or sister. Apart from some emotional blackmail messages from my sister-in-law, things have been quiet. That was until a few days ago, when my father-in-law called my husband and asked him to come to a family meeting. At first, we didn't want to go. My husband didn't want to face more drama, and I certainly didn't want to witness another situation where my mother-in-law or sister-in-law tried to paint him as the villain. but my father-in-law insisted, said it was important, and that he needed us to be there. Reluctantly, we agreed. When we arrived, my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and sister-in-law were already sitting waiting for us. The tension in the room was palpable. My mother-in-law seemed upset, while my sister-in-law barely greeted us. My father-in-law, on the other hand, looked more serious than I had ever seen him. Once seated, my father-in-law cleared his throat and got straight to the point. He said that since my mother-in-law's announcement at the last family lunch, he had been reflecting a lot about it. He admitted that he felt surprised by my mother-in-law's decision and, after thinking about it, realized how completely unfair it was that she had done something like that. Then he turned to my mother-in-law and said, "These houses belong to me. You had no right to give them away like that." My mother-in-law's face paled and my sister-in-law's smug expression instantly disappeared. Then, in front of everyone, my father-in-law pulled out a folder, extracted some documents, and handed them directly to my husband. At first, my husband hesitated, not sure what was happening. My father-in-law looked him in the eyes and said, "Our vacation house is all yours." My father-in-law had officially signed the deed of the house in my husband's name. My mother-in-law gasped. My sister-in-law's jaw dropped to the floor. My father-in-law continued explaining that, after much reflection, he had realized how much my husband had helped them financially over the years, especially when they bought the vacation house. My father-in-law felt it was fair to acknowledge his contributions. Then he announced that my sister-in-law could keep the family home for her children, but the vacation house would be for my husband and me. My mother-in-law tried to protest immediately. She argued that that wasn't her plan, that my sister-in-law needed both houses, and that it wasn't fair to her. But my father-in-law wouldn't allow it. He silenced her immediately, telling her that this wasn't just her decision, and that he wasn't going to allow her to completely ignore her son. My sister-in-law looked like she was about to explode. She tried to argue with her father, insisting that his decision was totally unfair to her and her children. She kept saying how she had been excited about having both houses since my mother-in-law had promised them to her, and now that dream had vanished. She looked at my mother-in-law for support, but there was nothing they could do, as my father-in-law was standing firm. My husband, meanwhile, was speechless. For the first time, someone in his family had really stood up for him. He silently thanked his father, still taking it all in, while I squeezed his hand in support. After that, we didn't stay much longer. My mother-in-law was furious, and my sister-in-law seemed ready to make a scene. But honestly, we didn't care. We left that house feeling lighter than we had been in weeks. My husband finally received the recognition he deserved, not just for his financial help, but for the years of being ignored and treated as if he didn't matter. Since then, my husband and I have been planning how to make the most of the vacation house and studying ways to use it as an additional source of income. Update 3. It hasn't even been 2 weeks since my last update, and just when I thought everything was over, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law showed up unexpectedly at our house. And I say unexpectedly because they didn't call ahead or ask if we were available. They simply showed up at the door without warning, ringing the doorbell insistently and demanding we let them in. As soon as we let them in, my mother-in-law started by telling us that she and my sister-in-law had been reconsidering things and wanted to have a mature conversation with us about the vacation house. That was already a red flag, but my husband let her continue. My mother-in-law then suggested that my husband should return the vacation house to my father-in-law, or, at least, allow my sister-in-law and her family to use it every summer without paying rent. My sister-in-law, of course, chimed in, claiming that her children had always loved visiting the house and that it was unfair for us to hog the property just for ourselves. My husband remained calm and simply told them that the house now belonged to him. They had no right to ask him to let anyone stay without paying. He also informed them that we had planned to turn it into a vacation rental and use the additional income to cover expenses for our family. That's when everything went out of control. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law immediately began shouting about how selfish it was to even think about doing that, accusing him of destroying the family heritage by allowing strangers to stay there. They acted as if he were committing a crime by choosing to do something practical with his own property. My mother-in-law continued, saying that this was why she didn't want him to have the house, and that the property was meant to stay in the family for personal use, not to be rented out. At one point, my mother-in-law even asked if it had been my idea to rent out the house, and mocked me, saying how money-hungry I was for trying to profit from her family's property. She insisted that I was manipulating my husband to make a decision contrary to what she and my sister-in-law wanted. My husband explained to them that they had no basis for blaming me when originally it was all his idea. He also pointed out that he had already talked about this with his father, who had no problems with it. He reminded them that, after all, the house was officially his and they had no right to dictate what we could do with it. But my mother-in-law wouldn't accept it. She kept arguing and insulting him, and that's when I lost it. I had been biting my tongue, trying to be patient, but it was enough. I exploded with rage and told them both exactly what I thought. I reminded my mother-in-law that she had already tried to harm my husband, and now that her plan had failed, she was trying to manipulate him into giving in. I told my sister-in-law that she had never contributed a cent to her parents, and yet felt entitled to everything like a spoiled child. I made it clear to them that we were fed up with their constant demands. And finally, I warned them that if they were going to continue behaving like this, barging into our house, disrespecting us, and trying to make my husband feel guilty, then they would no longer be welcome here. They were stunned. I don't think they expected me to finally set boundaries, but I was tired of being compliant. My mother-in-law stammered something about how I was turning her son against his family. My sister-in-law protested, saying we were being unfair to her and her children. Both looked at my husband for support, but he didn't give in. Instead, he firmly asked them to leave our house. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law huffed indignantly, but finally left in a fury. Since then, we haven't heard from them, and honestly, I hope it stays that way. My husband, for the first time in a long time, seems truly relieved to be free from this toxic dynamic. We're finally establishing clear boundaries, and if my mother-in-law and sister-in-law can't respect them, then they have no place in our lives. It's as simple as that.